Well, I think it's interesting because obviously in circles of, well, maybe not obviously, if you've never done yoga and you're not part of a yoga community, I was really heavily invested in Ashtanga yoga for several years and
That's a
was part of
deep one,
a
yeah.
and I still live my life by yogic philosophical principles. But in yoga, it's pretty much accepted universally that, hey, you might cry. Like you might be in the middle of a practice and something might crack open, or the whole idea is that you're working these things out of your body. And a person will do a back bend or a heart opener, and all of a sudden all this emotion comes out, and it's this big release, and then you feel like a different person, right? And some people will get stuck in a pose, and then they have this big emotional release, and all of a sudden they can access it like the next time they're in the studio. It I think it should be a big part of the conversation, because it, like you said, the issues are in the tissues. The body is the mind. And our mind and emotions, everything that we are, like, people think about like nervous system patterning for the body, and for movement, but like your nervous system is impacted by all of your personal experiences, all your emotional experiences. That is nervous system conditioning as well. So if you don't release that or let that go, you're not going to have some of those deeper level changes happen either. I think that's, I love that you brought that up. I love that you're planning on exploring that on a deeper level, because that's something that's been more quietly. It's interesting because I don't share that part of my practice a lot, but that has been a big part of my movement practice, has been a lot of emotional work as it relates to movement, and even seeing
Mm.
how different things that you process will affect your posture. There's like a whole theory. There's a great book called Eastern Body, Western Mind that talks about how the chakra system relates to Jungian psychology, and they have this whole theory about how different psychological profiles will affect different like versions of your posture, and
Yeah.
how you cope with the world and the stresses of the world based on reading people's postures. Very fascinating.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And if someone's, you can try and correct someone's, geek neck or whatever, but if their emotion doesn't change, if their, self-worth doesn't change, it's not really having any deep beneficial effect, and it probably won't last, to be honest. I call it soul mechanics. I think the emotional work is soul mechanics, and the way I see in the hierarchy is soul trumps everything, like it dominates all. So if we work at the emotions at the soul level, that's the stuff I've been doing the last few years. It's been the most beneficial to me, more than the biomechanical stuff. It's kind of fun and frivolous and my passion, but actually, everything that's good that's ever happened to us was because of love, right? And everything that's bad that happened was because of lack of love in some way. And yet, many of these practices don't talk about. I mean, I even heard Naudi on your podcast the other day say, if someone's worried, they'll hold a certain posture, and you have to try and get them out of that worried stage. And so they'll acknowledge it in small ways, but I don't think they quite value how profound and powerful that is. And because it's such a hard task to do, to actually guide someone into the emotion, because the emotions we're avoiding, and the ones we're avoiding feeling, we've built up everything in our life to avoid feeling certain emotions, and all sorts of protections and addictions to cover them up, and resistance and distractions and all sorts. So it's the toughest nut to crack, And I think there is some of the Jungian stuff about the shadow, that there's certain truths to it, or half truths, and he's circling the nest, but I don't think he's quite fully on the money. But there is a huge discussion with all of these systems that completely neglect emotions and try to solve everything physically. And there's just a whole spiritual world that exists, like you say, with the chakras. That, I mean, even the meridian system is like laughed upon when I share some of that stuff by some Western people, and it's like, and yet it feels so much closer to the truth when I'm looking at, the liver line, and you look at the traditional Chinese medicine, and how liver issues manifest in the nails and kidneys and the ears, and there's certain connections that I've had in my life when I look at issues, and the emotion of liver is anger, and because I think a lot of us, especially in this biomechanical world, have a lot of the same emotional injuries. There's a lot of probably father issues. There's a lot of arrogance. There's a lot of messiah complexes within this community, and I'm probably as guilty as anyone of easily falling into that kind of trap, and trying to work through that. It's funny how we've all kind of ended up in the same niche area, but there's so much emotions at play in how each system is promoting their system in the way they choose to do it, and it's interesting to observe from that perspective. And this is where I do think, you know, I don't want to keep talking about him, but now he talked about functionality is everything that matters, and beauty and artistic, and that is completely frivolous and misses the point. But here's the thing in nature is this is the masculine and the feminine. Everything in nature that is designed, in my eyes, by God or whoever's designed, however it's come to be, is a perfect balance of function and beauty. And this is how it is. You look at a tiger and tell me that's not beautiful. Like, you look at the forest, and until man comes in and has imprint on things, of course, but dolphins and all sorts, there's an equal balance. And here's the thing, now he even acknowledges it, because he talked about recognizing triangles and diamonds in body when they were aligned, and you can intuitively feel, and he gets it, but then he doesn't want to intellectually get it because everything has to be functional. And so there is a harmony here between beauty and functionality. And I think we're so masculine, left-brained in the biomechanical community that we're missing half of the picture, and that there is there is lesson to be learned from something like yoga or Pilates, which may be more female dominated, but we're missing some female input into this movement, and we're missing that there's beauty to be sought that will give us answers that we may be missing, you know?
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely a lack of even wanting to go to that side. And in the alternative biomechanics field, you already have to have like an alternative mindset. You've probably gone through some shit with the mainstream, the way you're thinking compared to them. And there's your trauma right there, right? Like I've experienced this myself, even in the small period of time that I've been in this world, right? So I can imagine someone like Nodi is just taking shit constantly. And that's a lot of negativity to be put upon somebody. And you will store that trauma. And
I think actually, if we can dig into that, because I'd love to. Yeah. It is the law of attraction. It's happened. It's in all of our childhoods. Normally, from conception to 7 years old, there's emotions which our parents shutting us down emotionally. So we've stored these emotions from childhood. So the law of attraction, it's not just this positive think of money and you get it. It's way, way more precise and deeper and scientific than that. And so just to give my story from my childhood, my father only really expressed, I felt love from him, actually felt love from him when I was successful, either academically or within sports. So this is something I came to realize in the last year. My desire to achieve in sports and be competitive and win, this is Jungian or whatever you want to call it, is to get love from my dad, because that's how I associate love from the masculine. Was I had to earn it rather than it be unconditional. Not many of us, if any of us, have had unconditional love throughout our childhood from our parents. So what is playing out when Naudi is getting attacked by loads of people online? When I was getting attacked from the vegan community, that was my mother issue. Now, when I'm trying to be achieve within the biomechanical world, I have to really check myself that I'm not just trying to earn respect of males because I want my dad to love me. Like, this is where it comes from. So there's a lot of laws of attraction at play. Like you say, we're getting these moments which might give us trauma. I actually think we've got the trauma and they're trying to help us identify it to release it. But if we're not humble to the emotion that it's trying to awaken us to, then we never make progress, and the issue continues to be smacked in our face, and it has to be louder and louder, unfortunately, until we get a cancer, until we get, and you can use Chinese medicine to identify. If it's the liver, then it's probably suppressed anger or too much anger, or if it's kidney, then you've got suppressed fear or something like that. But fundamentally, it all comes back to emotions. And